Welcome to the Arun Church podcast, where our mission is bringing life to everyone, everywhere, every day. Each podcast episode features the latest talk from our church, which are released weekly. We're passionate about Jesus, love to worship together, and are committed to changing our community for the better. Connect with us at arunchurch.com.
Thank you. What a morning so far. Just going to find my bit. I don't think I need to speak today, so I'll just get down. We'll carry on. But I've prepared it, so we better go with it. It's really great to be speaking to you guys again today and be back here. And so we have been thinking over the last little while about the story of Moses and his journey. And so this is where we find ourselves today, right in the middle of that story. So we've looked at Moses' birth and then journey out of Egypt. We've looked at when Moses met God in the burning bush and God spoke to Moses in that place. We've looked at Cat Talk the other week where God is angry with Moses. There's a whole kind of foreskin thing going on there. Listen to it on the podcast if you haven't. And then last week, Joseph Gisbey, it's confusing, isn't it? Spoke about the plagues, the first 9 plagues. Just for any of you who don't know and get confused with the two Joe Gisbeys, I am Joanne Gisbey. My brother-in-law, that's the relationship, is Joseph Gisbey. We are related, but I'm married to his older brother, Ben, who's over there. No, Ben, for anyone new. Yes, anyway, so Joe spoke about the plagues brilliantly last week. And today we find ourselves in Exodus 12, and we're going to be thinking about the Passover. And so my official title for today that I was given is Passover and the Price of Freedom. And my unofficial title is Remember Your Redemption. Remember your redemption. So we're thinking of all of that together. And actually what I felt God's put on my heart for this morning is really... It feels right from, the way that Becca opened up this morning, what Gareth was saying about what God wants to do this morning. So if you might have heard the story hundreds of times, I'm probably not going to give it in the way that you might expect. And I'm not Joseph Gisbey, so I'm not going to pretend like I am, like a Jewish historian, come up with some amazing facts to wow you. I thought about it and thought, nah, better not try, because it'll go wrong. So, so we find ourselves here. Moses has told Pharaoh that if he does not let the Israelites go, every firstborn in Egypt will die, from Pharaoh's own son to the firstborn of the cattle. Moses tells Pharaoh in Exodus 11, verse 6, there will be loud wailing throughout Egypt, worse than there has ever been or will ever be again. So this is Moses warning Pharaoh, saying, if you don't let God's people go, you've seen those huge plagues that have gone already. This is what's going to happen next. And you'd think that Pharaoh by now would have learned his lesson because he's seen some horrible things happening to his people and in his community. But of course, Pharaoh's heart, as we know, is hardened. And the plagues have already ravished Egypt. But Pharaoh's pride and arrogance and desire for power and control have stopped Pharaoh from letting God's people go. So today's passage tells us what happens next. I'm just going to really quickly summarize, because I'm not going to read you all of Exodus 12, because it goes into huge detail about the Passover, about what the Israelites are to do this night, and then about future celebrations and future Passover festivals. I'm not going to read it all, because that will take up pretty much the talk. So I'm just going to summarize it really quickly. So God tells Moses really specific instructions about what each household in Israel needs to do. To be saved from this plague of the killing of the firstborn. So first of all, they have to participate in this, in their bit of freedom. There needs to be some participation on their behalf. And so God tells them to sacrifice a lamb, and there's great details about the lamb that you're meant to choose, how to sacrifice it, what to do with the lamb, what to eat, where to eat it, who to eat it with, and all these kind of things. And God tells Moses to tell them to put the lamb's blood on the doorframe at the sides and at the top. And as the night comes, God will pass over their houses and their homes, and this plague of death will not hit their homes. So I'm going to start in verse 12 to 14. I am the Lord. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. This is a day you are to commemorate for generations to come. You shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord, a lasting ordinance. The following verses give details, and even more details, about future Passovers. And really huge emphasis is placed on the importance of the Israelites remembering this evening. So even before it's happened, God is saying, this hasn't happened yet, but it's going to happen. And when it happens, remember it. Never forget it. Never forget it. So there's a huge importance. Even before their freedom, they're told to remember it. So the Israelites did just what the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all the livestock as well. Pharaoh and all his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and there was loud wailing in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. Pause in that moment. This is freedom we're looking at, but in this moment, that is huge pain. There's loud wailing. I don't imagine at that moment the Israelites woke up and went, hey, freedom, woo, like this. You know, it's painful. They're going to hear that. It's going to be people they know. People, yes, the people who had enslaved them, but people that they knew, the world that they grew up in. Moses grew up as an Egyptian. He would have known people who've died from his own household. It's not a light, small thing. This is absolutely huge with irreversible effects. It's not like the frogs that then go. This has happened. It's real. It's painful. It's a huge price. During the night, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Up, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds as you have said and go." And then Pharaoh's arrogance, he says in this moment, "And also bless me." You just think like, honestly, I don't think I'd have liked Pharaoh very much. What a man. In this moment, he's like, all this terrible stuff has happened. But bless me, get this God to bless me, right? Yeah, don't really like him. The Egyptians urged the people to hurry and leave the country, for otherwise, they said, we will all die. The Egyptians were scared and sorrowful and fearful, and they can see the power of the Israelite God, of our God. They can see that power. So the people took their dough before the yeast was added and carried it on their shoulders in kneading troughs wrapped in clothing. The Israelites did as Moses instructed and asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold and for clothing. The Lord had made the Egyptians favorably disposed toward the people, and they gave them what they asked for. So they plundered the Egyptians. The Israelites journeyed from Ramesses to Succoth. There were about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children, and many other people went up with them, and also large droves of livestock, both flocks and herds. So finally, Pharaoh had relented, and he let God's people go. Finally, the Israelites are free to leave. It was actually 430 years to the day that they'd arrived in Egypt that this happened. It was a huge, huge, huge moment. So I want you to imagine. So maybe close your eyes if that helps. I want you to imagine this moment as the scene before you. So we've got the Egyptians, loud wailing and pain, and we've got these, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. They've taken the stuff from the Egyptians. The Egyptians have given them their things. They don't leave empty-handed with nothing. They leave with literally everything they need to start a life for freedom. They leave with everything they need to start walking a new life and making their own path. Can you imagine the scene of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people leaving? And the Israelites have never known freedom. 430 years, they've never known what freedom looks like. So how are they feeling? Can you even begin to imagine how they feel? So, they haven't got travel programs of the promised land, spend a week here in the sunshine. They haven't seen what this looks like. They haven't got travel books or, watching the news about different places and where they're going. They've literally been in Egypt for 430 years with no idea what freedom looks like, no real concept of how that's going to be. So they'll be excited, of course, full of hope. Absolutely. But there'll be fear. They've also seen all that's gone by. And as Joe pointed out last week, many of the the Israelites would have worshipped the Egyptian gods, and they'll be fearful. Who is this God? Who's this God that's done these powerful things? And there'll be fear there as well. So freedom doesn't look like necessarily just kind of skipping along in this moment. It's not that. There would have been an element of that, but also huge kind of tense anticipation, I suppose. So that's that moment. My next point is remember. So Passover for Jews, the celebration of Passover is a massive thing. And it still is for anyone who's Jewish. I think it's, for them, it's often like people in our country who celebrate Christmas but wouldn't call themselves Christians. I think it's like that for the Jewish people too. Often they celebrate Passover and go on holiday and see family because it's still, to this day, a really big thing for them. But God wanted them to remember. God gave them such detail to remember everything. He did not ever want them to forget. And for Jews, Passover allows them to kind of connect with their ancient lineage and with their history and with the people that have gone before them. It allows them to connect with that. It allows them to remember who God is, remember God's power, and remember the moment that their people were set free. And it's a big deal. It's a big deal. God wanted it to be a big deal for them. It's a big deal. So the Israelites needed physical freedom from slavery. They needed physical freedom. So our story. This is part of our story. Passover, as Christians, is part of our story. This first Passover is part of our story. Jesus celebrated Passover. So Jesus, as a child, we know, went to the Passover celebrations. He grew up celebrating Passover every single year. It was part of his life. It was part of his heritage and his history. And he did that. So I kind of think that's, even just that in itself, that's important for us. Without anything else, that itself is important because Jesus celebrated it. And we want to be like Jesus, so there's something to celebrate, remembering that moment of freedom. But of course, for Christians, it doesn't stop there. Of course, that's the beginning of the story of freedom, not the story of freedom for us. Jesus is our freedom. Jesus is our Passover lamb. Paul talks about this in the New Testament, that Jesus sacrificed his blood so that the judgment of God would pass over us, that we can have life and we can live a free life and know God and walk in that freedom. So that's our turning point from captivity to freedom, is when we come to know God. That's our point when it passes over and we take our first nervous step into freedom, is when we come to know Jesus, when we accept him and we know that it's his blood that sets us free. And in that moment, so the price of the Israelites' freedom was the deaths in Egypt, and that was the final thing. So that was the price that meant Pharaoh's eyes were finally opened enough to go, okay, let them go. And obviously the price was the lamb sacrificed as well. The price of our freedom is Jesus. He's the lamb that was sacrificed for us. His blood was poured out for our freedom. Jesus stood in our place and paid the price for our freedom. And his final words on the cross, it is finished. It is finished. Jesus brings us freedom from that which holds us captive. So this week I've been thinking about, the last month or so, thinking about this talk. And there's so many different directions I could go in now. So we've told the story. We thought about Passover and remembering those things. And remembering our redemption, remembering when we came to Jesus. But what does it look like to walk in freedom? What does it look like? I think Joe spoke again brilliantly last week, and that was one of the directions I was maybe going to take. What he said was about cutting those things off that hold you back, cutting those things off that you know you struggle with, that you know is here and that hold you back, cutting those things off. So I've kind of come up with the next little bit of, so some of those things might be cut off, and then what does it look like? So let's imagine we tried to cut some of those things off. And just for the sake of now, imagine we've managed. We're probably not there yet. No, I'm certainly not with my things. But just imagine. And what does that look like next to walk in freedom? And I was praying about this and thinking about this and thinking, what do you think of when you think of freedom? What do you think that means for you? If you kind of say, I'd like to be free from this. I'd like to be free from that. What do you imagine happens next for you? Joy, peace. Kind of that sense just of happiness and kind of rest. And then I was thinking, okay, so how do we do that? And I was thinking, well, comes down to really, it's the fruits of the Spirit, isn't it? So I looked at Galatians, but before I get to that bit, I've jumped a little bit. In Galatians 5, verse 1, before the fruits of the Spirit, it says, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free." It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. So stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. So Christ set us free for freedom. The price of my freedom is Jesus doing that. But what do I do next? What responsibility have I got next? It's to walk in that freedom. So if you know Jesus today, yes, you're free. Absolutely. Jesus did that. He did that. You are free. Nothing you can do, nothing you can say will change that. You are free. But what do we do in that freedom? What do we do with it next? So I'm not talking about grace and salvation. Jesus, he's done that. He's done that. But what now? What now? What next? How do we walk in that? So Galatians 5, verse 22 to 26. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. Those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. Since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking and envying each other. So I don't know if you notice in that, it says, those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. Something has to die. Something has to die to walk in the Spirit. So we crucify that. We let that, our flesh die with its passions and desires. And we know that it's sometimes not as simple as that. Sometimes our flesh is like, ooh, and those things can rise up in us again. And it's not that straightforward, is it? It would be good if it was, but it's not. Those things come up again and again. But what we have to do here, since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. I'm going to get you to, like a Sunday school class, repeat that after me, okay? Because I can, because I've got the microphone. Okay, so I want you to repeat, since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. Oh, that feels nice. Let us keep in step with the Spirit. So how do we walk in freedom? We keep in step with the Spirit. That's how we walk in freedom. We keep in step with what he's saying to us. And it can be complicated, and it can be huge, and it can be, life-changing, but it can be simple. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. I will refrain from doing the children's song. You'll be happy to know, John. And getting you up to do the dance. Yeah. So in the Amplified version, there's like a little table that gives you some definitions of those words. So I want you to imagine living a life of freedom with the fruits of the Spirit growing in your life. Okay? While I'm reading them. So love, the definition of love in the Amplified version is sacrificial, unmerited deeds to help a needy person. The definition of joy, an inner happiness, this is a really important bit, not dependent on outward circumstances. We can all be happy when everything's good. Yeah, none of us really struggle with that. When everything's great, we can be happy. But joy isn't that. Joy is not dependent on outward circumstances. Peace, harmony in all relationships. Tricky. Patience, putting up with others, even when one is severely tried. Even when one is severely tried. Kindness, doing thoughtful deeds for others. Goodness, showing generosity to others. Faithfulness, trustworthiness and reliability. Gentleness, meekness and humility, self-control, victory over sinful desires. Well, you'll be happy to know that standing on stage in front of you is someone who, wearing a pink floaty dress, has perfected the fruits of the Spirit. Nobody believes it? Oh, hey, Chris. No, of course not. Of course not. Of course not. Now, I know you might like that, of course Joe's not perfected that, but sometimes when you can look at someone on the stage in a dress, think, oh, that's easy for them. It's all sorted for them. She's got the fruits of the Spirit. I can see it. It's just obviously who she is. It's not me. They don't know me. It's not my personality. I kind of get a little bit annoyed sometimes when I hear that. It's not my personality. It's not my personality. It's not who I am. I just say what I think and that's it. You take it or leave it. That's just how I am. Like, okay, that might be how you might be naturally, but we're meant to be walking in freedom. We're meant to walk in freedom. We can stay like that. Of course we can. God will still love us unconditionally. He won't love us anymore if we're over here doing brilliant things all the time. He'll love us just as much when we're there being grumpy in the corner. That doesn't change. That doesn't matter. But if we want to feel what it feels like to walk in freedom, we have to take some steps. We have to walk, keeping step with the Spirit. We have to do that. And you know what? Who does not want to live a life where love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control are part of that? You know, that's living in freedom. That's living in peace, letting those things grow in your life. So make daily choices to walk in that freedom. And I want you to imagine a tree, okay? I work with, I've said this before, I work with children doing a lot of one-to-one things, and often we use trees when we're getting children to think about their life and their history and their hopes and dreams for the future. It's often something we use and get them to do artwork with that. What I want you to imagine is a tree, okay, in a field, in an orchard, okay? And lots of the trees in the orchard are kind of looking a bit worse for wear. They're diseased and they're not really growing the fruit and they're not really grown properly. And then I want you to imagine in the middle of an orchard, a tree with thick roots that go deep, a thick trunk that keeps it still and solid. And I want you to imagine branches that are full of fruit. The most delicious fruit that you can't help but go up and pick and taste. And when you taste it, oh my goodness, it's sweet. And it's not like when you have an apple and it tastes a bit dry or a bit like bleh. It's sweet and juicy and life-giving. Imagine that tree. Well, we're given this in the Bible, the fruit of the Spirit. Do you not want to look like a tree that's full of delicious fruit? And what happens when people see that tree? They want to, that looks amazing. I want to taste what you've got. I want to try and see what you've got, that sweetness. That's what we should be living like, or trying to. Nobody expects perfection, but we need to be keeping in step with the Spirit. Because if the world sees us, Christians, free, amazing, but not moving in that, it doesn't... God is God. He doesn't need us to make it look appealing. I'm not saying that. But what do they see when they see you? Do they see a tree that's kind of, one little apple there? Well, there's still an apple on it. It's all right. There's an apple on my tree. Maybe you're kind of budding and you're not quite got the apples yet, but you're trying and they can see that. They can say, oh, look, soon there'll be those apples. Or do they see a tree full of fruit, full, that they look at and they go, that's what I want. That's what I want. I want to be like that. That's how we should be living or trying to live. So let me just check the time. Okay, a little bit longer. So I'm going to tell you, so this week I've been thinking and pondering on what it looks like to live a life that's free and how to do that and what to do. And I've been finding myself get a little bit annoyed about various things and a bit grumpy. And I suddenly decided, after chatting with Tash last week, she reminded me of when we used to go to Zumba many, many years ago, and we used to just laugh our head off. We were both, well, she was much better than I was. I was always a bit out of step. I've not got Carolina's Colombian hips. It wasn't so good. We would just laugh and laugh and laugh, and it was so much fun. And I thought, you know what, I have a great life with lots of good things in it, but that kind of really silly, giggly fun I really miss. So I've been going, right, I'm going to find some fun. So my children have enjoyed hearing my ideas of the fun. I've suggested, I've been playing my flute again, yes, and then it broke. That was a bit disappointing. But that was fun for me. I know many people it might not be, but it was fun and it's life-giving, and playing the piano more and those things, and I love that. And so I decided to go for a walk on the beach. Ben was in London. My oldest daughter is 14, so she was responsible for the other two, and I went for a little walk on the beach. And I was kind of in a bit of a grump, and I was kind of going, right, God, I'm speaking on Sunday. I know what I've got to bring, but I don't really know what I've got to bring, and I'm feeling a bit grumpy, and how can I speak, and blah, 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 blah. And I went, I don't really know what I'm praying even like this. And God just said, just go onto the beach. Just be with me. And I hear God like that. God just said, just be with me. You don't have to come with anything. Just be with me. So I did, and I went down onto the beach. And then a man ran past with his shoes off, running after the dog and really laughing, just playing with his dog. And I thought, oh, that looks fun. That looks a bit like freedom. That looks like freedom to me. So there I am I wasn't in a dress. I was in my lovely tracksuit trousers and oversized hoodie. And I rolled up my tracksuit trousers and held my shoes. And I just started running along the beach. The sea was out, so I was running along the sand. And I just started giggling to myself, like giggling and laughing. And it felt so good. And like the water was cold under my feet. And I'm not very fast at running. I used to be quite good, but I haven't run properly in a while. So it was, it wasn't an attractive thing. And but the feeling of the sand under my feet was just precious. And then I had a phone call in the middle, which disrupted my peace. And then I was a bit like, oh, that was my peace. That was my little time. I'm a bit disrupted by that now. And then I giggled to myself again. I was like, oh, come on, Joe. Come on. If you're trying to walk in freedom, isn't it slightly, a phone call that was a little bit challenging, is that going to take your peace? And I laughed and I went, no, of course not. I carried on walking in the sand and carried on going. And then when I got to the rocks, I don't even know Rustington Beach, probably most of you do, but the rocks, my children play, my youngest especially plays The Floor is Lava. Now, for those of you who don't know that game, it just means you're not allowed to touch the ground. You can only kind of stay above the ground. So I was like, right, on my own, 44-year-old woman, yes, I did. I thought, I'm going to play The Floor is Lava on these rocks. Thanks, Kat. And so I was doing this with my bare feet, holding my trainers, my tracksuit trousers rolled up. And I literally stood on the rock, and without even thinking, so there was no intentional spiritual significance here, I went, it's good to feel the rock under my feet. I said it out loud. And then I laughed, and I was like, oh, God. And then, it's good to feel the rock under my feet. It's good to feel the rock under my feet. And I remembered, God, you are the rock under my feet. Always, always, always. And I did quite well. I fell on the floor once, just so you know, the lava got me once. Apart from that, I did pretty well. And then I carried on, and I was kind of, obviously in this moment with me and God makes me laugh sometimes. He really is so kind. And he just sometimes says these little things to me that make me giggle. And I was kind of, quoting some verses and singing little songs. And I started quoting the verse, I do not give you a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power and love. And I went, you do not give me a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power and love. And I couldn't remember. I was like, and what's this? And I don't know if people who know this verse. Power and love. And I was expecting some, I don't know, likewise word. I mean, power. Oh, who doesn't love that? Power, yes. God, spirit of power. Love. Who doesn't love love, right? I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? Spirit of love, woohoo. And then I got my phone out and I looked it up and I was like, you give me the spirit of power and love and self-discipline. Oh. Not goodness, not miraculous signs. You give me the spirit of power, love, and self-discipline. And again, I laughed and I said, okay, thank you, God. So you give me the spirit of power, love, and self-discipline. Keeping step with the Spirit it requires self-discipline sometimes. It isn't all, sometimes it can feel natural, sometimes it is easy, and sometimes you can feel like skipping or happily, and it does sometimes feel like that. And other times it's like, oh, I'm going this way, and the Spirit's trying to take this way, and you're like, no, this way, this way. It's not always easy. It can take self-discipline. When the flesh wants you to go over here, the Spirit wants you to go that way, and you're like, no. But self-discipline says, it's what you want. Okay, keep in step with the Spirit. Right, we're going. And it might be that you're walking really slowly at the moment. That's all right. It's okay to be walking slowly. But if you find yourself that you really are over here, and God says, hey, I love you too much to just leave you there. Come on. Fruit of the Spirit. Come on. I've got what you need. I'm giving you the spirit of power and love. And he says he gives you the spirit of self-discipline. He gives it to you as well. Like all the other things he gives us. It's a gift. It's a gift. But it does require self. It's in the word, isn't it? Self. Like self-control in the fruits of the Spirit. We sometimes forget that one because it's not so jolly. But you know what? When we can learn to live in freedom and walk in freedom and remember our freedom, then you know what starts happening? The more in step with the Spirit you are, the more you're walking in that freedom, the more you see the people who aren't. And you don't look on them like, oh no, they're not in freedom. I am. Because if that is what you're doing, well, you're actually right back here. You look at them and you go, I want this for you too. I want your roots to go deep. I want your fruit to grow. I want to look at you and go, oh, look at your fruit. Look at where you are. You know, we're never promised an easy life. We all wish we were, but we know we're not. God has given us freedom, and he will help us to walk in that freedom. He doesn't leave us on our own, but he doesn't leave us as we are. So stop making excuses. I'm talking to myself too. Stop let's making excuses because of this, because of that, because of the other thing. Those things are real, but God gives us what we need to keep moving, keep in step with the Spirit. Passover is a huge journey. The price of freedom was huge. Huge. The price that Jesus paid for our freedom is huge. Remember your redemption. Remember it. Not just, I'm a Christian. Yep, go to church. But remember, every day, every minute, there's not a requirement with that, with our freedom. We are free, but there is a responsibility that comes with it. So, I don't know where you find yourself today, when I'm talking about that orchard and the trees in the orchard, I don't know what you where you feel, whether you feel full of fruit or whether you feel like you've died, whether you feel like you're withering and there's nothing left, or whether you feel like maybe you're just a little shoot, just starting. God doesn't need you to be anything than you are right now in this moment, and he will walk with you and walk you in freedom. So you are free, but let's really walk in that. If the Israelites were free and they just crossed the border and left their houses, but hadn't kept walking, they wouldn't have been free. We know the next bit of the story. They'd have been captured again. They had to keep moving to experience that real freedom. So I'm going to stop there. Remember the price of your freedom for the Israelites and for us. Remember your redemption. Walk in freedom and fight for freedom for others. And lead people into their freedom and to the Lamb, the Passover Lamb that is Jesus, who gives us freedom, who gives us the spirit of power, love, and self-discipline. All right, and invite the band back up and pray. Okay. Jesus, thank you for this sacrifice that you made that bought our freedom. Without that, where would we be? Who would we be? Thank you for that freedom. Thank you that when we come to you, when we come to know you, that you set us free and that we can live a new life that's full. Thank you that you walk with us in the really hard times, in the really good times, and every little bit in between. That you're always with us. Your grace is enough for us. Lord, I pray for anyone here who feels captive still, who perhaps doesn't know you yet, doesn't know that freedom. Lord, I just pray this morning that you would speak to their heart and you would just say to them that they are loved and that you died for them to set them free, to give them life. I pray for people who know you and love you and live in that freedom, who still feel like what I'm talking about today is far from where they're at. Lord, I just pray that you would take away any sense of shame, any sense of not good enough, but that, God, you would just draw close to them and you would say, walk with me step by step. You know what? God will hold your hand and lead you and guide you on your walk. And for those people who might feel like their fruit tree is full, start giving your fruit away and fighting for others' freedom, fighting to see others walk in freedom and to know that kind, like Gareth was saying, that gentleness of your spirit, that kindness of who you are. Beauty for ashes, life. It was for freedom that you set us free, Jesus. Let us walk in that. I pray for everyone this week that you would give them a moment, that you make them smile, that you would whisper to them, and that you would see all of us as a church keeping in step with your spirit. and leading others to know you and to find you, because there is nothing like you, and there is nothing like your love, and there is nothing like being in your presence and knowing you. You are so good and so kind always. Amen.